Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mom Please, the discussion and debate show that spans generations and attempts to make sense of everything that's going on in the world and in modern society. I'm your host, representing the millennial viewpoint, Eric Joseph, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host, representing the baby boomer perspective, Carol Stram. Hey, Mom, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. What's heavy on my heart a little bit today is this idea of what we're talking about, which is a great debate amongst our people and culture today about talking about political correctness and cultural appropriation.
Right.
And so put away your sombreros, Kimo-sabe. It's going to be a rough ride. Okay, I know that was politically incorrect.
A little bit.
Now, I don't know. Does that mean I can't wear a sombrero anymore? Or
I mean, if it's Cinco de Mayo, maybe. It
I don't
depends.
know.
How are you
I don't know.
representing it? I think that's what we're trying to get to. How are you representing it plays a big part in all of this whole thing.
Oh,
You know.
that makes sense. And just as far as Kimo-sabe, that's a nod to Jay Silverheel, who was a real Native American who was in the Lone Ranger series on TV when I was a little youngster. And he would say, "Hi ho, Silver." And he'd call his boss Kimo-sabe. So
Yeah.
that's a nod to him. I am not culturally trying to diss anybody on that. But
Well, that's good. That's good.
okay, so anyway, we'll start with political correctness. And
Sure.
essentially, that definition is conforming to prevailing liberal opinion by avoiding terms that marginalize, exclude, or insult groups of people who are socially disadvantaged or discriminated against.
Right.
So, in short, it's using terminology that's basically offensive to particular groups.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but there's a short list of things that we can talk about that have cropped up in the last, 10 or 15 years maybe, that
Sure.
are politically incorrect.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to give you alternative terminology to utilize, essentially.
Right.
So the first big word that jumps out at us is antebellum, and that
Okay.
refers to anything that's pre-Civil War in the South, kind of celebrating slavery and
Okay.
the financial success of the South based on the backs of the slave labor population.
Okay. I can see why that would be something we might not want to celebrate nowadays.
Right, and that has gotten so heated that the country group Lady Antebellum has gotten rid of their name Antebellum, and now they are just Lady A. I don't know what the A stands for though, but now they're just Lady A.
I could think of a few things.
Okay, maybe not what you're thinking.
I won't
of.
say them here.
Right, and closely associated with those two words are the word plantation, which
Right.
the term that you
Yeah.
might want to use today is estate. But this is, the South was built on these large plantations, which were all worked, whatever kind of crops they were, or livestock, or whatever they were worked essentially by African American slaves. And so the South allegedly is removing plantation from any verbiage. So municipalities are removing the word plantation. However, I just spent about a week in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and there's the plantation golf course, there's the plantation restaurant. It's still widely used.
Sure.
So
okay.
I don't,
That's interesting.
so
Living in the North, growing up in Chicago, you never really come across places that are named these sort of things. So it's interesting to hear that that's still in popular modern usage.
Right. It's not in our vernacular per se. And then the word Dixie, which literally refers to the Mason-Dixon line, the free North and the slave owner South, that term is being removed from usage. Okay. So you have Dixieland bands, which were predominantly African American jazz bands.
Okay.
That's a term that's losing favor because it is based on the Southern slavery movement.
Sure. Makes sense.
And although, and there's also another group, the Dixie Chicks, who are just
Yeah.
now, they're the Chicks. But, you know, there's the Dixie Cup, which doesn't seem to care. And there's Winn-Dixie doesn't seem to care. So there's some issues with that.
Sure.
Broken home, dysfunctional family. I don't have much to say about that, other than I think broken home implies that it's not an intact mother-father situation. And that doesn't mean a family with just a mother and children or a father and children is dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So
single parent home.
Yeah. Right. Bum, a homeless person. I like to refer to a bum not as a bum, but a person who rides the rails across the United States.
Yeah.
Crazy, mentally ill. I use crazy all the time. I don't believe that all crazy actions are the result of mental illness.
What would you define as like a crazy action? Does anything come to mind specifically?
I don't know. If somebody walks in with like a new goofy hairdo or something, I would just say, hey, that's crazy.
Okay.
You know,
that seems pretty low key. That seems pretty, yeah.
Not problematic, maybe. Criminal
I don't
behavior.
know, maybe not.
Okay.
This one, yeah, go ahead. This one I actually wanted to talk about.
Behaviorally challenged. Again, I use this term all the time. I use it for a behavior. I will call a person who has been incarcerated or has participated in illegal acts a criminal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've said this before, right? I live in Chicago, and not a particularly dangerous part of Chicago, I don't think. Now, in most of the city here, there is gang activity in some form or another, but a fair bit of it is more serious in certain areas, and then there's a lot of it that's less serious. And I live in one of the areas of the city where I believed it was less serious. But literally a week ago, I was out walking my dogs, and it was in the middle of the day. I think I was taking them out for their afternoon walk, 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. And I hear gunshots. 5 shots go off, relatively close by. And I can tell they're close by now because I've heard gunshots enough in this neighborhood now to where I can tell if it's far away or close by. It's kind of telling you something. And not just that, but then like 30 seconds later, a black SUV, all tinted windows, flies down the street that I'm walking down, probably going 60 miles an hour, goes straight through an intersection that's a 4-way stop, not stopping. And I'm like, whoa, hey, I just witnessed the shooter vehicle just driving away from that. That's cool. That's great. I would refer to those people as criminals in every sense of the word. This stuff, if things like this are actually getting changed nowadays, then I do feel like that's a step too far in terms of the political correctness scale. You know, if we're going to go certain words or certain changing things are okay, certain things are not. I don't think those people are behaviorally challenged. I don't when I, am driving around in my car, I don't shoot people when I'm having a bad day, So I don't know.
Right.
I can still call people a criminal, I think.
Right. And I agree with that. So I reject that idea per se. Eastern and Oriental, which is really Asian now.
Yeah.
Although the University of Chicago still refers to their Asian Studies Institute as the Oriental Institute. I'm not sure why they haven't gotten that.
Yeah, you would think in a city like Chicago, that's like a blue city for the last 7 decades, that they would be on that, but I guess not. I guess nobody's complained about it yet.
Factory is being replaced with plant because a factory implies a sweatshop, and I say, does it really? I mean, a plant I feel is like something you manufacture at. Not all factories I don't know. I don't agree with this one. I just
Yeah,
don't.
I don't know what that's about.
Yeah.
I might look into that a little bit after
Right. Right.
this episode.
Right. And then failure is deferred success. BS. I'm calling this out. Sometimes there are just plain failures. And
What
even
about
wait.
failing
Oh,
upwards? You know, what about all those people who
well,
fail and then they just get like promotion after promotion or whatever?
well, not only
Hey,
that, what
fake it till
about
you make it.
they not just the fake it till you make it people, but also there's the people that end up failure, and then they come upon it. I think things like, the light bulb was like that. There were failures before there was the ultimate success. So I don't look at
Right,
that.
that's true.
No, I say no, not deferred success.
Yeah, okay.
Fairy is gay. And I think the only way you should use fairy is if you're talking about Tinkerbell and,
Yeah.
Disney.
Yeah.
Fat and large physique or big person. So, when you say to your spouse, oh, do I look fat in this? Do I look enlarged in this?
Do I look bigly in this dress?
Yeah,
You know?
I don't.
That's a trap question anyway. Never answer that, guys. If you're out there, just say, babe, you're an angel.
You're
an
great.
angel.
You look great.
That's the answer.
I suppose when we're talking about obese people,
yeah,
that a big person is the proper terminology.
Sure, I guess.
But
I'm not a big fan of the fat acceptance movement. I'm going to say it right now. I'm not a big fan of the fat acceptance movement.
I think I use the word fat, but
I don't even think they call it that anymore.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like body positivity or health at all sizes, right? Something like that.
Right. Okay, and then there's foreign food, which is basically ethnic cuisine.
Oh,
but
okay.
I think in the United States, the only food that isn't foreign is Native American food.
You could say that. You could say that.
I love this. Founding fathers is just the founders, and yet, have we seen a female founder? Was there any?
Well, okay. So there was this really funny AI thing that happened a couple of weeks back where I think it was called Gemini, but Google was having this AI create pictures and people were asking, do pictures of the founding fathers. And it was the founding fathers. There's like an Asian woman, a black guy, like two white dudes, a Native American guy in a headdress. And it's like, yeah, I don't know if this AI is working correctly.
Well,
it was.
Yeah, and I do understand that our nation was built on colonists.
Yeah, diversity.
Right? On colonists that came over from England, and then we separate from them. But all of the founding fathers then are white guys.
Yeah. Generally like white English guys at the end of the day.
Right. Okay.
It's just the historical accuracy.
Correct. Garbage man is the sanitation engineer or trash.
What else?
Trash collector. I'm okay with trash collector. I will not give them an engineering degree. I'm super sorry.
Yeah.
It's just descriptive. That's all that is.
Yeah, and I think this to me kind of gets me because I went to 4 years of engineering school and it took me 5 years actually. Because it's hard. It's not easy. And to say, a trash collector, if I'm going to use that term, is a sanitation engineer, I think that waters down the term engineer. And I didn't even become a full-fledged engineer. I don't call myself an engineer because you have to get a license for that. You have to go to additional testing after school. So I have a rough one with that. Plus, my sanitation engineers broke my trash can's lid off of its handle one week, and then after I put it back together, every week thereafter they just break it off again and not put it back on. So I can't call them engineers because they're not engineering anything. At least put it back together.
Okay, you're ranting about your trash collector now.
Well, yeah, a little bit.
The ghetto is an economically challenged or disadvantaged area.
Okay, yeah.
I always felt like if someone was ghetto, it was really, they were street, they were street smart or whatever. So I get that I get that this is offensive. I don't use the term by and large, but I also don't think that every economically challenged area is a ghetto.
Sure. So, and just to give a little context maybe for you on that, my generation has definitely always used the term ghetto to describe something that is generally considered like urban, but definitely a subculture and not desirable. It's like, oh, that girl is so ghetto because, she's unattractive or she dresses kind of immodestly, let's say.
Right. But you hear what that's right. But you hear how offensive that is.
The association there. Yeah, I totally get that. I'm not saying the way that we used it was appropriate. I'm just saying that the way it was used definitely was as a pejorative to say, if we wanted to say something was cool or urban, we would say that, that's so street, oh, that's so hip. But, saying something is ghetto there's definitely, we used it in a negative connotation.
Right. Yep. Okay. So nix that from the words. Girlfriend, wife, fiance, partner, significant other. I do not accept this language.
Yeah.
I do not accept this language because it's so sterile and it's not descriptive enough for who you are. It sounds unromantic, unpleasing to me.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
So you have just found somebody recently that you guys literally put rings on each other's fingers, but you're not getting married or anything, right? So what do you describe yourselves as, if not like a life partner?
We are permanent fiancés.
Permanent fiancés. Well, that's interesting. I wonder if we can get that into popular usage, into the vernacular.
Right.
Okay.
And then guns. Firearms.
Yeah.
I did not get that memo. I don't understand why the word gun is.
Yeah. Okay. So this one, I might have jumped the gun a little bit on this just because I wasn't fully aware of the YouTube specific rules, but I did check into it, and you can say gun. I believe they prefer you to say firearm, but there is strictly no showing of a lot of various gun related things. On YouTube. So it is a sensitive topic for sure.
So you can't, for instance, you can't show a bullet?
I'm not sure about that. From what I saw, it said you can't show things like putting certain attachments on an assault rifle style weapon. So like a silencer or a scope, things like this nature. Obviously you can't show yourself shooting people. That's probably pretty bad. So don't do that. I've seen people do things like target shooting, though, on YouTube, so not everything is strictly not allowed.
Okay. Home economics is now family and consumer sciences.
Yeah.
I think as the home expanded from just being women at home to being men and women at home, that it also expands into consumer activity and more family oriented. I don't really know about that. Yeah. Okay. Housewife, domestic engineer. Okay.
That's a funny one. Again with the engineer thing. Why is everybody an engineer all of a sudden?
Right. And I don't like the term housewife.
Okay. Why not? Why not?
Well, okay. So if you're a woman who is married that stays at home, doesn't work outside the home.
Yeah.
Do you call your partner a working husband?
I think in a certain time period, well, I guess not. You would just say that they're your husband, right?
Right. So
yeah, right.
So
that's true.
I just think it's, and I love the idea of homemaker, if that's how you want to say it, because
that's a nice term, I think.
Home is where the heart is,
and you're the one who makes it.
Right, yeah. And that's a lovely term.
Yeah, that sounds
Housewife,
nice.
Hate it. Illegal aliens, obviously undocumented immigrants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Illegal aliens to me sounds like ET,
Yeah.
extraterrestrial.
Right.
You know?
That's true. I think that's what the Republicans want you to think when you hear that term.
People from Mars.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so I'm going to say a verboten word here. Indian.
Okay.
American Indian is okay for the tribes to refer to themselves, but not for us to refer to them.
Okay.
They're indigenous peoples, Native
Yep.
Americans, First People.
Mm-hmm.
But they really like you to utilize their tribal names, like Mohawks and Navajos.
Yeah.
And so I think when you say things like, oh, I'm hanging with my tribe, or I'm a member of the tribe.
What if you're Jewish, though?
Well, that's
because they have tribes. They have 12 tribes.
And
right?
that is commonly in the Jewish culture.
In their vernacular, right?
Right. In their vernacular, they say, I am a member of the tribe.
So if you actually have historical tribal associations or connections through your culture, then it's fine. Yeah?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
But,
makes sense.
So, and then male or female is now your gender at birth.
Yeah, a male at birth or a female at birth, AMAB or AFAB. Yeah,
right. And,
I have heard of this.
And, okay, and so medical offices, for instance, have to ask that because they have to know how to treat a patient when they come in.
Right.
So they have to know not what you claim to be,
not what you present as. Yeah.
Right, but what you were
born as,
genetically born as.
Yeah.
Because it's a treating issue. So
sure, that makes sense.
Now I missed a little portion that just had a little line and it said sex, and you put an M or an F there.
Yeah.
And in my case, sometimes I would say yes, I like that.
Mom, please. Like, hello, Rodney Dangerfield calling. Like,
master bedroom.
Time.
Yes, master bedroom is now the
primary bedroom, right?
Or it's the primary bedroom because it refers to the slave owners.
Yeah,
which makes sense. I don't know, men's jobs, women's jobs, which are just traditionally jobs that are male and female. Like a good example would be, I don't think of a nurse as female. I think of a nurse as a job, and that was traditionally female. Although I think in the Meet the Fockers movie, maybe that was made fun of a little bit.
They like to play with some of these things that subvert your expectations a little bit.
Right.
Which it does, because most nurses, I do believe, are female. I mean, I went to a college with a nursing school, and I can tell you that 95% of the people going to that particular college were nurses. The nursing school, at least, or were women. Excuse me, were women. Obviously, they're going to be nurses, or they are trained to be nurses.
Right. Okay, and then there's midget, which is now a small person. Small person.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that years ago, like in the early 60s, there was a movie and a TV show called Gidget, which she was a small girl, a diminutive girl, teenager, girl, midget, Gidget
the midget, yeah.
Yeah, so not politically correct anymore.
There was a porn star that went by the name of Bridget the Midget. I wonder if she calls herself Bridget the Little Person now.
Yeah, I don't want to even know.
Sorry, Mom.
I don't want to know why
she was on reality,
know that.
or it was reality TV. Yeah. Trust me, it's not. I watch normal porn. Okay, I watch normal porn. All right.
Ooh. Okay, and then the N word, which I can't even say. Yeah. I can't even think about it. It's undeniably wrong. But I will say this about that. I just recently saw the play To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh,
and this is set at a time where in U.S. history, where the N word in the South is used like
every
any
day,
other word.
Rampantly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think taking that out of that play would have not had the same impact.
It was used in the play. They used the okay.
Liberally.
And white people, I assume. Yeah.
Liberally.
Okay.
And so my thinking is that if it is in the context and it adds to the texture of what you are trying to communicate,
yeah,
that's super important to do.
That's okay, I think.
That's our history.
Yeah, it's contextually important, I think, there are reasons that you don't want to erase certain negative things that people did in history, because if you erase those things, then it's likely that you're bound to repeat them again. So
that's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
Secretaries and administrative assistant.
Sure.
Sex change, gender reassignment, gender transition. New. This is still evolving. Gender affirmation, which is your right to define your own gender.
Right.
And you had some information regarding the UK Tory party on this.
So there's been a little bit of legislation in the UK that's been bandied about here and there. And in the UK, there is a process to define your gender the way that you would like to. Mm-hmm. It takes some time. It's not, simple one and done, super easy. But the Scottish Parliament was trying to vote through a bill that would expedite that process significantly, to the point that you could basically just declare on a form your gender, and you would be granted all of the rights and privileges associated with that gender and be able to use all of the facilities that gender would be able to use. The Tory party in the UK decided that was not something that they wanted to have happen, so they actually went to the Scottish Parliament and said, nope, we're not going to allow this. And that was pretty much the end of that story there. So there are a lot of different things happening around this with the gender reassignment and gender affirmation, and we did go kind of into that in our first episode about trans athletes in women's sports. But yeah, there's a lot of different opinions about this right now and how to handle it and how to deal with it.
And I do think that this is just going to continue to evolve.
Yes.
As it has. I mean, we're seeing it going from gender reassignment, gender transition, now gender affirmation. That's a different word.
Yes. That's definitely a different concept.
That's different than getting reassigned or transitioning. Right. So that's interesting. Swamp is the wetlands now, because we don't want to hang out with the alligators and the snakes and the mosquitoes.
So does that mean we have to drain the wetlands now if we want to get rid of all the political entrenchment in Washington? Is that
yeah.
So that they don't get offended, the poor politicians?
Just for the record, that's still the swamp.
Yeah.
Okay.
Truly is.
Trailer park is a mobile home community.
Oh.
I'm guilty of using this. I say, my next housing move is going to be to a trailer park.
Well, yeah, says the lady with the giraffe statue in the background.
Right. So I guess maybe, maybe I should cease and desist on that. Not funny.
Maybe. That's kind of, but does that mean that I can't hang out with the boys on a given night and watch Trailer Park Boys?
I don't know.
That's just a TV show, a bunch of guys being funny. Are they? I mean, they are being a little politically incorrect, surely, with that show in its entirety, and I think that's part of the point. But, if they are allowed to do it in that context, I feel like I should still be able to say trailer park in my own life, because it doesn't seem that offensive, does it? Maybe it is.
I think only if you look at. I think it's just like we were saying before. It's like ghetto. It's like we assign in our head that the folks that live in the trailer park are poor.
Are a certain way. They're rednecks.
Oh yeah, there's a nice word.
Is that a word that I can't use either?
I think rednecks call themselves rednecks. I don't really know.
I think they do. But wait.
Yeah.
Black people sometimes use the N-word though, and we can't say that. So
Well, okay, so maybe we can't say it.
Yeah.
Unless, okay. The word ugly is visually challenged. I don't accept this. I think that when you are talking about things, if you see a house, you can say, oh my gosh, that's an
that
ugly
house is
house.
ugly.
Somebody drives an ugly car.
Yeah.
You can say those things. I think when you're assigning it to a person and how they look,
Yeah.
that might be different.
Well, I don't think anybody wants to be called ugly, do they? Probably
no.
not.
What is that? Yeah, probably not.
Wasn't there a whole show? What was the show? Ugly Betty or something or other? That
Right,
they took like a really pretty actress. Or wait, well, I don't know who the actress was, but yeah.
America Ferrera.
Ferrera. Oh, the Barbie girl. That was her?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, that was her.
Yeah. So obviously she's not ugly. Yeah.
She is not ugly. But the thing that I would say about this is that we use, even if we don't use the word ugly, we use all kinds of terminology around this
to describe
we say that person has a face only a mother can love.
Right.
We say, oh, she's a butterface. Yeah. Everything's cute about her, butterface.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
or she's busted, or she's a grenade because you wouldn't even want to jump on her if she was live. Like, there's a whole assortment of terms. Those are from my generation.
Right. We used to say someone's a perfect 10, a 4 with money.
Whoa.
Okay. So, or you'd say about a guy who wasn't that great looking. Well, he's good on paper.
Yeah.
Right.
All the stats are right.
So, right. So, all of those things need to be axed. You can't just say, it's not just ugly. It's that kind of referencing to people. As my mother would say, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all.
Yeah. I think Will Smith said that once.
Yeah. Oh, well, Will Smith. He's having a rough go of it.
Yeah, he is.
Anyway.
Yeah,
he is. Yeah, he is.
Anyway.
White trash still acceptable.
Yeah.
Recently used by J.D. Vance in the book Hillbilly Elegy. As hillbilly is okay too, apparently.
Huh. I feel like I've watched a couple of different media, and the terms redneck and hillbilly, I feel like, are actually used to describe different things. It's not quite the same type of person. A redneck is a very specific, different thing from a hillbilly.
Sure.
So there are levels to this sort of thing.
Right. And, so I would be remiss, though, if I didn't mention, because I don't want to talk about every single one of these. But
yeah. There's too many to list.
Right. There are so many derogatory terms towards African Americans, Jewish persons, Germans, Irish, Hispanics, Arabs, Asians, Eastern Indians, even white people. We're crackers and whiteys. I'm personally not offended. I'm not really offended by that. But really. Let's just use the proper terms for people. Let's just try to get on that page.
That makes sense.
Okay, so this is only a small list of politically incorrect terms. I think what we're losing sight of is the bottom line, which is treat people with dignity and respect.
Yeah.
And if you in your conversations, if you do that, I think you will avoid the use of derogatory terms. Be respectful.
I think mostly, although we do find ourselves at points in time where the formerly derogatory or the formerly acceptable term becomes derogatory, right?
Right.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
We'll talk about that in a little bit. And sometimes I think we're getting rid of words that provide texture and meaning. They're super specific.
Yeah.
But I also understand that if some group of persons find things offensive, we have to cut them off.
Sure.
So, we kind of were talking about this, like, how do comedians survive this? And like, if you start out with where comedians started, they were the Henny Youngmans and the Jack Bennys. All they did was tell jokes.
Yeah.
All they did was tell jokes. And then this next wave of guys come out, like Dick Gregory and George Carlin, and they come out and they really press the envelope, and they are politically incorrect.
Right.
And that goes so far that modern day comics some are getting, I guess, canceled because of their verbiage and how they use it. Now, I personally have seen recently, I think the guys who skirt this issue are like the Seinfelds and the Jim Gaffigans, because they talk about situational comedy. They talk
their
about
humor is very PG, I think, for the most part.
Right. So I guess, where does that leave the comedian who wants to press the boundaries? How do you do that?
Well, I think a big part of this idea with comedians and with comedy that everybody likes to talk about is the concept of punching up versus punching down. If you are, let's take me, for example. I am a straight, white, cisgender male, to use all the PC correct terms. I grew up in a relatively privileged household. I didn't have anything that would negatively affect me kind of based on who I am. So I'm very high on what we would think of as like the privilege scale, if you want to call it that. So every time I make fun of somebody who's like a different ethnic group than me, a different race than me, somebody who is less fortunate economically, that's punching down, because I am at the top of this pyramid. I am standing at the peak, and I'm just like, ah ha ha, look at all you, poor saps below me. So that doesn't feel very good to everybody who's below me, which is a lot of people, right? Now, if you're kind of at the bottom of the socioeconomic or racial hierarchy, you are basically allowed to make fun of everybody else because you have experienced, or your characteristics about you that you did not choose yourself have affected your life experience. And that allows you to kind of punch back at the people that might be considered responsible in a way for your suffering or your misfortune. So there is that idea where, certain people are allowed to make fun of other groups of people because, life has kind of sucked for them, or things have been historically very, very negative for their culture. And I think that's something that usually happens, but not always, because you have some certain situations where comedians like Dave Chappelle, who were once widely revered as one of the greatest comedians of all time, has recently come under attack for views he's expressed on the trans community, his buddying up with Elon Musk, who, if you want to look at the privilege pyramid, would be absolutely at the very, very pinnacle of it. So Dave Chappelle has found himself in this weird place where he became really wealthy and now he's out of touch. And so now he's kind of punching down. But a guy like Bill Burr, who's a white guy, has been able to get away with quite a lot of spicy comedy, if you will, a lot of raunchy bits. I mean, he does a bit where he says something like, everybody's out here trying to say it's never okay to hit a woman. And I'm sitting here like, really? It's never okay to hit a woman? And he's like literally saying it's okay to hit women. And people love that joke. People eat that joke up. So there is that. But
you know what, Eric? I would suggest the reason that people love that joke is because Bill Burr, a white guy who would be unlikely to ever hit a woman.
It's true.
Delivered, it's delivered in that way. It's delivered in a way like, you people know I would never do this.
Right.
I mean, if it were, if it were some other dubious person,
sure,
P. Diddy, for instance.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Okay. We can talk about that some other time. That's a whole thing. Jeez.
They can't make a joke like that. But somebody who is clean, squeaky clean, probably can. So given all of that, like, who is somebody that everybody, all cultures, all peoples could really look at and go, that is a great comedian. We love that. that person?
I think he's not with us anymore, but Robin Williams is, I think, highly regarded by just about everybody. And, posthumously, he's essentially been elevated to kind of the peak of comedy, both his stand-up and his movie roles.
Right.
And that's interesting because his stand-up, if you go back and see some of his stand-up material, he's cursing a lot. There's a lot of words being tossed around. It's pretty raunchy. There's a bit about him, like, at the zoo looking at how hairy he is, and he's like, I'm fucking hairier than this fucking ape I'm looking at in this zoo.
Right. You know, but he also did a lot of dialects.
Yeah, he did that too. Impersonations.
Impersonations of other people's.
Yeah.
But he seems well regarded. Right. Anyway,
he didn't do, as far as we know, he didn't do anything like P. Diddy or whoever is out there doing these nefarious things. So I think that does help him. You know, he didn't do what Louis C.K. did. You know, allegedly, right? Allegedly. Let's hope. Please, God, let there be somebody out there who's clean. Oh man.
Okay. And then, my own experience with political correctness really is around my own ethnic upbringing.
Okay.
Because I was raised by, I had immigrant grandparents,
right,
from Poland and Italy, and in my neighborhood, I was often called WAP, which means without papers, which means you are here illegally.
You're an illegal. It's what they used to call illegal aliens.
Yeah, that was, but it was only assigned to Italians. It was derogatory towards Italians.
Okay.
Of not, and then Dago, which was assigned to Spaniards and Italians, which was a diminutive form of Diego.
Okay. Yeah.
And you say those to Italian people and they don't like it very much.
Right.
And then in terms of, Polish people were always called Polacks, and that it's not that word so much as the meaning behind that word is that these were stupid and dumb people. The implication of Polak is that you're stupid and
you're dumb. Yeah.
So, and again, that's just that's been my own little experience in that regard.
So your neighborhood in Bridgeport, it was pretty diverse, right? There wasn't just Italians or Polish people there. There was a lot of different ethnic groups, right? And it was right near Chinatown, yeah?
Right. It sat next to Chinatown, so there were actually a lot of Chinese in Bridgeport as well.
Yeah.
There were Hispanics, Germans, a lot of ethnics, Lithuanians, Croatians.
Yeah. Was there any sort of like racial hierarchy that was born out of that?
Yes. The Bridgeport community was founded by the Irish. Irish people came here and they knew the language already.
Yeah.
So that they had a leg up.
Elevates them,
and then you get...
That's funny because Irish people, I think, historically weren't looked fondly upon during times of immigration a lot.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. All I know is that from that vantage point, they were people who were a little bit more connected to they were more Americanized.
Yeah. They were already more similar to Americans than any other group, so they assimilated more easily.
And then, the Italians and the Poles were below that.
Okay.
There were Germans. Germans were probably a little bit above that. And Asians were below that. Hispanics being on the bottom of the hierarchy in that environment. Although I would say that neighborhood, and I can't speak for it today, but that neighborhood was ethnically segregated.
Even with all those different groups within it, there was segregation within the small.
Right. I went to an Irish Catholic elementary school.
Okay.
And that was because a wave of Polish people moved in at some point.
Okay.
So
interesting.
Anyway,
Yeah.
and and there were all kinds of bad terms
Yeah.
used for these poor people, for all of those people. We had two Hispanic kids in my elementary class, and let's say the one kid was, Pedro Garcia.
Okay.
His nickname was Pancho.
Oh, jeez.
Pancho
Villa,
so,
right? Yeah.
So everybody had nicknames. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
And they weren't always nice. And then beyond just words, then there's a bunch of phrases that are used that are politically incorrect that we'll just go through. Open the kimono.
Yeah.
This refers to Japanese warriors opening their kimonos to show that they are free of weapons.
Oh, seems like an old term.
It is an old term.
Yeah.
And it also is, kimonos were worn by geishas, and geishas were hostesses, but they got the reputation as prostitutes.
Yeah.
So that's something that I don't think Japanese people feel very good about. Off the reservation refers to Native American people who at the time of being on reservations left the reservation.
Right.
Meant that they were hunted down and killed.
Oh, geez. Nowadays, that kind of means you'd be crazy off the reservation, a little local in
out
the head.
there, like kind of out there.
Yeah.
Eskimo, of course, that's from Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
Its meaning is rooted in one who nets snowshoes. The preferred term is Inuit.
Pretty benign. Yeah, sure. That makes sense though. American Inuit.
The Edmonton Eskimo Football Club dropped Eskimo from there. And those yummy little Eskimo pies we used to eat are now Edie's Pies, which is named after the company's founder.
Okay. Okay.
But that's okay by me because I love a Klondike bar.
Sure. Who doesn't?
Yeah, I know. Okay, and then there's the Peanut Gallery, which were the cheapest seats in any vaudeville theater, always occupied by poor people.
Sure.
I like that terminology. I don't know, but I
that
guess,
seems like something. What is vaudeville? Is that like really old? I'm not even familiar with that.
Vaudeville was theaters prior to movies.
Oh,
you
so
went to a theater,
okay,
and you saw live shows.
So nobody alive today probably. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And then there's fitting Indian style, which we now use crisscross applesauce.
I kind of like that. I like crisscross applesauce. I'm okay with changing.
Yeah.
On that.
Then mumbo jumbo was used to describe a mashed African dancer. I always thought it meant language that was incomprehensible.
Yeah.
So I had that meaning wrong.
Okay.
But that's verboten now. That's a no-no.
Interesting. Okay.
And then the paddy wagon, of course, is a reference to Irish immigrants being arrested and put in a police van. It's a stereotype that the Irish are drunken, unruly criminals.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of funny because I just recently saw an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where they had it was St. Patrick's Day, and they made the St. Patty's paddy wagon, which would drive people around, and they would drink beer in there. And, knowing Always Sunny, it doesn't exactly go quite the way they wanted it to. Some criminal activity takes place, but,
Yeah. Well, welcome. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Again, comedy. There's certain times where these words are plenty okay in comedy, it seems.
Right. I think so.
Yeah.
So why does this happen, Eric? The movement of words that used to be okay and now they're not okay. So a while ago, and this is maybe 10 years ago, I heard of this term, the euphemism treadmill. And
this is funny because I searched out articles specifically to make sure to refresh my knowledge on this. And there was an article from 2012 titled "The R Word and the Euphemism Treadmill." And I believe that I said in our last, maybe not our last episode, but one of our recent episodes, that I wanted to be able to say the R word and, this, like, right? And you kind of made a puzzled face and you confronted it with me after it. And you were like, Eric, what is the R word? Is it, is it redneck? Is it, what are we talking about here? And I was like, oh, no, Mom. And just to, respect YouTube and respect the platform that we're on right now, I will not use the term, but it rhymes with regarded. Let's just say that. Regard or regarded. And this article examines the usage of words like this and why they were used in modern English at all, how they fell out of usage, and why they'll probably be used again in the future in ways that we nowadays would see as offensive. So that word was once accepted and was a professional term used for a person with mental or developmental disabilities. It has now fallen victim to this phenomenon called perjuration, or the euphemism treadmill. The euphemism treadmill is a process by which words for taboo or negatively associated subjects, things like body functions, disabilities, death, etc., are born as euphemisms, which are more polite ways of discussing a certain subject that is negative. And then over time, they gradually acquire negativity from negative usage in modern language. It essentially is born as a term generally for a very specific purpose from a very specific place. That term hits the wider audience of the public. The public starts using it for another purpose, which is decidedly less wholesome, and that word then becomes offensive. It gets removed essentially, or we desire it to be removed at that point from modern vernacular. Now, the problem with this is that these words have to be replaced with some other word. So these euphemisms that were okay at one point and now are not okay are replaced with new euphemisms that are now okay, but will in the future become not okay, because people will start to use them in the same way and it never ends. And that is why it is considered a treadmill.
A treadmill.
It never stops.
Okay. So give us an example of a series of words that were in favor and have gone out of favor.
Sure. This is it was really easy looking back at the medical community specifically. So a couple of terms are created in the early 1900s to describe people who have intellectual disabilities. And the Association of Medical Officers of the American Institutions of Idiotic and Feeble-Minded Persons, and that is a title of a former institution in America, that whole thing. So a very official place decided on these terms and decided that there needed to be a way to describe certain people. So they had three terms: morons, imbeciles, and idiots. Morons were people whose IQ was considered to be between 50 and 70. Imbeciles were people whose IQ was considered to be between 25 and 50. And idiots were people whose IQ was considered to be below 25. So these are essentially terms to categorize the level of not intelligent you are, essentially. But they were really truly used to describe people who had intellectual disabilities and not necessarily just people who were dumb. It's not.
Oh yeah, no.
Right.
Can we say dumb? Can we say dumb?
Yeah, I think so. So the medical community created these words with a specific purpose to describe specific people so that they could operate with certain rules or practices around those people when they needed to.
It's a classification system, essentially.
Yeah, essentially it's a classification system. There's no malice created from these terms or no malice intended. Now, the use of these terms in common language starts to become something that's other than this medically described usage, and people just start calling each other morons or imbeciles or idiots when they do something moronic or idiotic. So the medical community says, hey, that term is now not really great anymore. We need to decide something else. So the word slow becomes a bit of a stopgap term, which is then eventually replaced by the word that we are talking about now.
Do you want me to say it? Can I say it?
Well, here, let me just say it in context of
In the context of this
association that named the term. So in 1960, a progressive and respectful new term is introduced by the now American Association of Mental Retardation. And this new term, which is in that association's name, ended up lasting for about 30 years in popular medical usage to describe what was formerly known as morons, imbeciles, and idiots. In 1992, the Association for Retarded Citizens of the United States dropped that word from their name and has since been known as the ARC. That was essentially when this term was decided to be no longer fashionable.
Wait, now, so they leave that term in there.
They leave the R in there, but
they just make it ARC.
They just don't say it, you know. So it's there, but they're just not saying it. And in 2007, the original American Association of, Mental Retardation changes the classification. This isn't 2007. They're still using that name, by the way, in 2007. Changes the classification again to intellectually or developmentally disabled, and changes its own name to the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. So we're further going along this quote-unquote euphemism treadmill. Now, even with all of that, Mom, language progressed and new terms came out like Asperger's or autistic, and eventually those became pejorative insults. People among my generation and I believe among Gen Zs referred to people as Aspies or autists for a period of time, when, now we're really preferring the term on the spectrum. Even that probably will be co-opted because the words that replaced Asperger's and autistic was special education students, which the younger generation now is using the term speds as a pejorative insult to describe those people. So there really is no way off this treadmill. And I'm sure that you probably were unaware of some of these terms even being used and falling out of favor, right?
Yeah, I never heard.
You never heard of this stuff, right?
Austin. But what I will say is that the words that were used then are used to describe people who are not developmentally challenged.
But you say that to somebody who's doing something that you would look at and say, why are they doing that thing? That's not very smart of them.
Right. Basically. Now, I will say that I personally love to use the word moron and idiot.
Yeah. And that's something I want to touch on because that's very important that you said that.
Yeah. I mean, I do use those words. Anyway, that's super interesting that this will just continue to evolve and evolve and evolve.
Right. Yeah. And so, the first person to coin the term was a Harvard linguist by the name of Steven Pinker, who wrote in the New York Times in '94 that the euphemism treadmill shows that it's the concepts, not the words behind them, that are in charge. So if you associate a certain thing with a negative connotation, then it doesn't matter what word you use to describe that thing. That word will always become a pejorative insult among the wider populace. So even if you give the concept a new name, the concept doesn't become refreshed by the name. It doesn't all of a sudden everybody look at it and is like, oh, that's great, and like you say, you use the term, moron as a put down, or people even would say, like, if you said something to somebody and that person wanted to tell you, oh, that's obvious, they might say to you, like, well, duh. And that's a bit of an imitation of cartoon characters who are mocking speech impediments of people with intellectual disabilities right there.
Right.
So, these are considered, like, doing the stuff saying idiot or moron now, or saying like duh, is considered acceptable right now. But they were once phased out of medical usage due to the popularization of them as terms that were pejorative insults. And if you give it enough time, that word that, you know, we're avoiding using that rhymes with regarded probably is going to fall back into popular usage. And in 50 years from now, kids are going to be running around calling each other that and saying that to each other, and nobody's going to care because it's going to become like idiot or imbecile or moron, where at a certain point in time in the 40s, people cared about that. But now it's like whatever.
Right.
So
that's very interesting.
Yeah. And I do want to say, I think our audience might hear me say these things and say, oh, wow, he really is harping on about this. He wants to say that word. And it's not that I really, really have a hard on for saying that. It's just that, you know, there's nothing wrong with trying to change words to more accurately reflect the reality that we exist in. However, that effort to me seems futile if we're just going to change the word. What needs to happen in order for us to move beyond this is to say that being mentally regarded is not a bad thing, and therefore it carries no power as an insult. It's a lot like what the African American community or the Black community in America did with the N-word. They took it back, and it removes the power from that word because they use it among themselves, and therefore it doesn't have the same effect. So,
well, although I disagree in the sense
I know. That's the idea behind it.
In their community.
Right.
Among
themselves in their community. Like, I can't go and use that and you know, not get shot, right?
Well, so, you know, it's, hey, whoa. But I do think, I'm curious about this idea, like these organizations changing their names.
Yeah.
Like I've often wondered why the NAACP doesn't change their name.
National Association. Oh yeah. Well, okay. This is interesting because I would like to tell a story. So the NAACP stands for the National Association of American Colored Person, or the National American Association of Colored Persons. Is that correct?
Right.
So I had I roomed with a Black guy in college for a year, and there was an interesting thing that happened that relates to this. At some point in time, I think during the second semester, he was taking an African American Studies course, and he gave a speech during that class, and he was using the term minority students throughout that speech. Now the teacher afterwards went up to him and said, you know, great speech, you know, really, really well done, except one thing: we don't like to use the term minority students anymore. We prefer the term students of color.
Right.
And I, you know, hearing that thinks historically to like the 1950s and the civil rights movement, when saying that term, but in the reverse order, not person of color, but the reverse order, was a horrible, horrible term. And we no longer say that. So it's curious to me how if you just move the words around a little bit, it becomes something that's okay. And I even discussed that with my roommate. And he kind of felt the same way. He was like, yeah, when she said that, I was a little taken aback. I was like, we're really using that? And yeah. So, you know, that is something that's kind of interesting, where that is okay. If you use it in certain contexts, it is completely appropriate, apparently.
Right. The reason that the professor corrected the student, however, is because minority is not the proper term anymore, because
it makes people feel lesser.
No, if you look globally in the world, white people are the minority, and people of color are the majority. So it doesn't. That
is true.
Doesn't work anymore. Yeah. Anyway, it's funny because I've also been wondering about this concept of the phrase "first world problems," and this refers to when my friends have, a trivial little problem, they refer to it, as a first world problem.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's
I've
right,
done that among my friends. Yeah, I think.
right. And
Or my friends have done that with me.
Basically where that came from was during the Cold War in the 50s and early 60s. Classifications came out. I think the French were responsible for the classifications of third world countries, second world countries, and first world countries. First world countries were all countries that were aligned with the United States, all the European countries, Australia.
When about this happened? This was in like the 50s or 60s that this stuff
50s,
was. So
50s.
Cold War era, just to
Cold War era.
The stage.
And then second world countries were anybody that was aligned with the Soviet Union.
Right.
So the Soviet Union, Cuba,
those Soviet kind of bloc nations surrounding the Eastern European nations.
Right.
Yeah.
China, Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, all of those were second world countries. And then third world countries were Africa, Asia, Latin America.
Okay.
So basically they were defined as
if you were capitalist, communist, or none of the above, or you didn't fit into either of those cleanly. And pretty much
these terms, you don't even hear second world anymore because the Soviet Union
doesn't exist
anymore.
Yeah.
And the additional part of that is that the third world countries are now referred to as developing countries or the global south.
Right.
Or least developed countries. And that's interesting because I was looking up a lot of reading about this, and I found a quote from this Nigerian author, Teja Cole, and she said, she doesn't like the expression first world problems. It's false and it's condescending. Yes, Nigerians struggle with floods and infant mortality, but these same Nigerians also deal with mundane, seemingly luxurious hassles like connectivity with your BlackBerry. Okay, this might be a little dated. Who has a BlackBerry?
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, cost of car repair, how to sync your iPad, what noodles to buy, but are considered, third world problems. All these silly stuff of life doesn't disappear just because you're Black and you live in a poorer country.
Right.
So people in the richer nations need to have a more robust sense of the lives being in the darker nations. In other words, they're not always dealing with, mortality and floods and drought. They're dealing with other things as well. So this person says, here's a first world problem. The inability to see the others as fully complex and as keen on technology as you are.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just an interesting way to talk about we've got to get rid of this mentality of first world. And, now I say to my friends, this is a Carol problem.
This is a me problem. Yeah.
It's a me problem.
I think that's probably a better way to phrase that, even because, if you look at, even if you want to call them first world countries, I'm sure a lot of the issues that we would ascribe to the third world are problems here. You see things like infant mortality. It's not like babies don't die here. It's not like there aren't people living on the fringes here. It's not like there's not problems with drugs and problems with criminality and all these other things that you would more associate with poorer or developing nations. So it is a bit of a false dichotomy that's being set up between developing nations versus developed nations. And I've even stumbled across some research or some information in my research that suggests that certain people in those developing nations don't really like that term either.
Right. They don't like that term.
There is a social psychologist, a professor at the University of Cape Town in South Africa by the name of Shose Kessie, who had this to say about it. I dislike the term developing world because it assumes a hierarchy between countries. It paints a picture of Western societies as ideal, but there are many social problems in these societies as well. It also perpetuates stereotypes about people who come from the so-called developing world as backward, lazy, ignorant, and irresponsible. Now,
Right.
I think personally for me that I struggle to see the connection from that perspective when you're talking about developed versus developing, if you're using that terminology. But she goes further, which helps bring some context to it. So she says, in my view, the developed-developing relationship in many ways replaces the colonizer-colonizing relationship. The idea of development is a way for rich countries to control and exploit the poor. And you can see this through the development industry, where billions of dollars are spent, but very little gets achieved. Come to think of it, actually, I hate the term. So I think she kind of brings something to light here that's very important to note, is there is a development industrial complex which operates on this idea that they're bringing a bunch of financial aid and resources to areas of the world that are in dire need. However, those areas, once that money gets there, often the money doesn't get used in a way that actually helps anybody. And you can point towards Haiti as an excellent example of a place like that, or Gaza as another excellent example of places like these where money flows into these places at exorbitant amounts. Billions and billions of dollars flow into these countries, and yet they are not, that money is not used to improve the lives of the people. Haiti right now is essentially Wild West. It's like Mad Max down there from what people have said about the situation. There's no government. There's nothing good is happening. And all this money is flown in there, and where does it go? You know, generally, I think, to line the pockets of a lot of the people doing it. And there is, you know, if you want to research a little bit something yourselves, viewers, you can go look into how a lot of the development projects that happened post the Iraq War in Baghdad or in Iraq, tons and tons of the money that went there went to American contractors, not Iraqi contractors. Which, I mean, if you're developing in that nation, people who live there, local labor should be used.
Right.
So, you know, I can definitely understand the perspective when you think about it in that way, where you do have people who don't like the term developing, because if it's developing, then why aren't they developed already? You know, that's probably what they're thinking, and probably why it sounds so negative to them. Right.
So I feel in that respect, either that concept needs to go away completely, or something more acceptable to all parties needs to happen in terms of the naming of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So another thing I was thinking about was the words black and white. Okay.
Yeah.
I just watched a Netflix documentary, Stamped from the Beginning, where white America decides that black is bad and white is wonderful.
Right. Yeah.
And there were studies in 1947. Kenneth and Mamie Clark did the famous doll study, where they gave children, black and white children, dolls to play with.
Okay.
These children were aged 3 to 7, and all of the children picked the white dolls because all of them.
Wow.
Because they felt that the white doll was better than the black doll.
Right.
And that reminded me of something that occurred with me just about a year ago or so, and I had the conversation with you. Yeah. I was super excited because I got these new golf clubs, and they were shiny and black, and I just loved them. And I said to you, "Oh my gosh, I just love these clubs." And you said, "Well, why did you want to get these clubs?"
Yeah.
These black clubs. And I said, "Because I want to look dangerous." And you said, Mom, you can't say that. That's not
Yeah,
politically
that was a Mom Please moment before Mom
Yeah.
Please existed. I
Yeah.
cringed internally at that a little
Right,
bit.
right.
I think I
And
said I corrected you and I said something like that's not PC, Mom. You
right,
can't say
right.
that.
And I said, okay, so if that's not PC, can I say badass?
And I was like,
And
yeah, that's
I say,
fine.
well, but maybe I can't say that either. But here's the point I'm trying to make. I am so culturally embedded in white America
Yeah,
that I don't get those connections all the time. So
right.
I'm really trying hard to be better at this. All
Yeah,
I wanted to say was these golf
they're
clubs were
cool.
they're super cool.
Yeah, and I think there is something to be said about associating black with cool. You know, I think that there was even a whole movie, the sequel to Get Shorty was called Be Cool, and there was that whole scene with Cedric the Entertainer where the Russian mobsters tell him be cool N-word, and then he just launches into this whole monologue about how he is cool. You know, he's like,
Right.
"What are you talking about? I am cool.
Right.
So, and it's very interesting because the whole dialogue or the whole monologue is about how black culture is seen in America as cool, and that's 100% true. It's absolutely packaged and sold that way to people.
But I believe that. Is
Yeah.
that wrong to believe?
No, I think you're just maybe a little susceptible to marketing.
Oh,
And I think
okay.
we all are.
Okay.
We all
So
are.
if we were to wrap up our thoughts
Yeah.
on political correctness, what would be your take here?
Well, I definitely would consider the concept of the euphemism treadmill and how it affects the way that you use words. And I say you in the general sense.
Yes, yes.
And just think it's okay if we change some words to be more representative or more accurate of what they're trying to describe. I personally would like to see a little bit more effort, not just directed at changing the words themselves, but changing the perception of the concepts that they describe and working to better our understanding of what those concepts are so that we as a group of people aren't using certain terms in a negative, pejorative sense to describe other people. I think it goes back to what you said way earlier in the episode about just treating people with dignity and respect. And I know that can be hard. I know that maybe not everybody that you come across you feel like deserves dignity and respect, and maybe that's true. But, at the very least, we can be better. We don't have to always stay in a place where we're using these pejorative insults in a way that really makes an entire group of people feel badly about it. We can say certain things, use a pejorative insult here or there, but try to keep it in a way that you're not disparaging an entire group of people. It's that situation where, you might say, oh, this is, that's some buffoonish type of behavior. And then some guy who's a buffoon comes along and he's like, hey, I take offense to that. That guy doesn't describe me, or whatever it is exactly. I don't want to always have to change the language that I use, but I do think it's fine that if language changes and language evolves, because it will. It always will. Words are going to get repurposed all the time for various different things. So just be okay with it.
Yeah, and I agree in the sense that, yes, we should try to evolve because we shouldn't marginalize other people. We really should try to utilize our language in such a way that it is not hurtful to another human.
Right.
I do think it's hard. So it does take a conscious effort.
Yeah.
I don't think it comes natural to a lot of people. But I do think that in order to be better, and we can be better, in this sense, we can be better. And so that we should continue to strive to do that and to understand as the treadmill moves, try to understand it.
Yeah.
I
How do you move with the treadmill as the treadmill moves,
or,
you know?
and I think the important thing is to go backward in order to go forward. So
Sure.
for instance, like understanding, a lot of people I see are really aggravated with the change of the term, the master bedroom, right?
Yeah.
They're just,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, but if you really take that back from whence it came, you could perfectly understand where it should
Why
just be the
people want to
primary.
change that. Yeah.
Right, it should be the primary bedroom, and it's just that simple.
Yeah.
So anyway, enough said. I think we've brought out a lot of interesting points.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we have. And I think, I think that does it here for us today. Thank you all for joining us and taking the time out of your busy day to enjoy our conversation. Please remember to hit that like and subscribe button on your way out, and look for us as well on Spotify and Apple Podcasts this upcoming month. We are working to expand our way onto as many platforms as possible to make it easier for you to listen to us, whether you're on the go or you're just relaxing at home. So we'll be back with another episode of Mom Please next month. Until then, remember to mind the generation gap and keep the conversation civil. Take care, everyone.
Okay, bye.